December 1944, the Ardennes. A U.S. military policeman stood in the fog with his rifle half raised, staring at a soldier who looked exactly like one of us. American helmet, American field jacket, American boots crusted white with road salt, a Jeep with the right star on the hood, and in the soldier's gloved hand, an identification card that was almost perfect. Almost. The password was right. The unit patch was right. Even the way he complained about the cold sounded borrowed from a real American throat. So the guard let him roll forward. One wave of the hand, one engine fading into the timber, one man in a stolen uniform disappearing behind our line. By sunrise, nobody in that sector trusted anybody. Not the driver, not the lieutenant, not the man who had shared a foxhole with you yesterday, because the enemy had stopped trying to break through the front only with tanks. They had started trying to break the Army's confidence in its own face. That was the genius of Operation Greif, and that was the sickness of it. A German could be dressed as an American, driving an American Jeep, carrying American papers, giving American orders to American traffic. So we built checkpoints everywhere. Roads froze under long lines of trucks. Colonels were pulled from staff cars. Generals were asked baseball questions by boys who had not slept in 2 days. Men who had survived Normandy suddenly had to prove they knew who played center field, what state Springfield belonged to, and who Mickey Mouse's girlfriend was. Some answers saved lives. Some nearly got Americans shot by Americans. And somewhere inside that chaos, one of Skorzeny's men reached my checkpoint with the calmest face I had seen all winter. He did not panic. He did not overplay the accent. He did not make the mistake we were trained to catch. He made the mistake nobody had trained us to look for. A single printed word. One ridiculous Army typo. The kind of mistake a real American card carried because the Army had printed it wrong and nobody bothered fixing it. The German forger saw that mistake, and because he was too careful to look careless, he corrected it. To understand why that mattered, you have to understand what Hitler was gambling on in the last winter of the war. By December 1944, Germany was losing everywhere that mattered. In the East, the Red Army was coming. In the West, American and British forces had broken out of Normandy, taken Paris, and driven toward the Reich one exhausted mile at a time. Hitler chose the Ardennes because he had chosen it before. Dense forest, narrow roads, bad weather, ground where armor could vanish until it was already too late. In 1940, that route had helped Germany stun France. In 1944, Hitler wanted it to do something even more desperate. Split the Allied armies, reach Antwerp, choke off the port, and force a political settlement before the Soviet advance made the whole idea impossible. The men on the maps called it the Ardennes Offensive. The men in the snow called it the Bulge. Buried inside that offensive was a smaller plan, stranger than any tank attack. Otto Skorzeny, the Austrian SS commando who had become famous for helping free Mussolini from a mountain prison, was ordered to build a unit that would not look German at all. Captured American uniforms, captured American jeeps, captured weapons, forged papers, false traffic orders. English-speaking German soldiers trained to move through the rear area like ghosts wearing our laundry. Their mission was simple on paper and poisonous in practice. Get behind the lines, cut wires, turn road signs, misdirect convoys, spread rumors, seize bridges over the Meuse if the larger attack moved fast enough. But even when the bridges never came within reach, the rumor did, and rumor traveled faster than armor. Skorzeny had wanted thousands of men and enough American equipment to make the disguise feel complete. What he received was less than the fantasy. Too few vehicles, too few proper uniforms, too few men who could speak English without sounding like they had learned it from a book, a radio, or a prisoner. Only a narrow slice could truly pass as American under pressure. The rest had memorized what they could in a few frantic weeks. How G is cursed. How G is held cigarettes. How they slouched when an officer was not looking. What a Hershey bar meant to a cold boy from Ohio. What a baseball question might sound like at a roadblock. It was not culture. It was camouflage. And every man sent forward inside it knew what capture meant. Under the accepted laws of war, wearing the enemy's uniform to deceive in combat could strip a soldier of the protection a prisoner normally expected. Captured in that clothing, he might not be treated as a soldier at all. He might be shot as a spy. That knowledge rode with them in the jeeps. It rode with them under the American wool. It rode with them behind every word they practiced until it sounded almost natural. We heard the warning before we understood the scale of it. At first, headquarters passed the alert down the way headquarters passes anything down in a crisis. Urgent, incomplete, and already half mutated by fear. German troops in American uniform, possible false MPs, captured jeeps, road signs reversed, rumors of assassins heading for Eisenhower, rumors of German accents hiding under Brooklyn slang, rumors that every rumor was itself part of the German plan. After that, the rear area stopped feeling like the rear area. A cook could be questioned. A driver could be disarmed. A major with frost on his eyelashes could find a rifle under his chin because some 19-year-old from Kansas did not like the way he answered a question about the Cubs. We asked passwords. Then we asked hometowns. Then we asked state capitals. Then we asked questions no German crash course could fully prepare for. Who was Betty Grable? What league were the Yankees in? What was the name of the girl in the funny pages? What did a man from Texas call a soft drink? The trouble was, Americans failed those questions too. A farmer from Arkansas might not know a New York ballplayer. A school teacher from Oregon might freeze on a state capitol after 40 hours awake. A general might give the correct answer and still be held because the MP asking him had the wrong answer in his own head. That was the part Skorzeny did not need to control. He did not need every infiltrator to succeed. He only needed us to start suspecting one another faster than we could move. On the third night of the alert, I was posted at a traffic control point near a road junction that had become more important than its size deserved. Supply trucks, ambulances, staff cars, tank recovery vehicles, and exhausted infantry columns all tried to squeeze through it in the dark. The snow had turned the ruts into gray glass. The fog sat low enough to swallow headlights. Every engine sounded like it was coming from the wrong direction. Just before dawn, a jeep came out of the timber. One driver, one passenger, both in American coats. The driver gave the password cleanly. Not too fast, not too slow. He had the bored irritation of a man delayed by rules he considered beneath him. That was good acting, because most real soldiers sounded exactly like that. I asked for papers. He handed them over without reaching too quickly. That was good, too. His name matched the movement slip. The unit marking matched a formation we knew was operating somewhere west of us. The signatures looked right enough by flashlight. The passenger even muttered something about cold coffee in a voice that sounded like Pennsylvania if you were charitable, and like a classroom if you were not. I asked the driver where he was from. "Decatur, Illinois," he said. I asked what a man from Decatur was doing this close to the front. "Same as you, Sergeant, trying to get through it alive." That earned a laugh from one of my men. I did not laugh. Not because the answer was wrong, because it was too polished. Real tired men did not always answer neatly. They complained. They forgot. They repeated themselves. They got angry at the question before they thought of a clever answer. This man had been trained to be plausible, and plausible, that winter, was not always safe. I asked him who the governor of Illinois was. He hesitated for just long enough to look human. Then he gave a name close enough to pass a man who did not know better. I asked about baseball. He gave me the Cubs, the White Sox, and one player whose name he pronounced like he had only ever seen it written. Still, it was not enough. You do not shoot a man because he says a ball player strangely in a country where half the army has accents that sound strange to the other half. The line behind him was growing. Drivers were yelling. A medic leaned out of a truck and screamed that he had wounded men freezing under blankets. Pressure is a weapon, too. I handed the papers back and let the Jeep move, but I wrote the plate number on the back of my glove. 2 hours later, the same Jeep was reported at another junction, asking for a road to a fuel dump it had no reason to know existed. An hour after that, a corporal swore he saw the passenger studying telephone lines instead of the road. By noon, we had the Jeep stopped inside a barnyard with 2 rifles on the driver and 1 on the passenger. They were separated before either could decide whose story to follow. The passenger folded first. Not completely. Men rarely fold completely. But enough. His accent thickened under fear. His Illinois disappeared. His hands shook too much for a man angry at being mistaken for the enemy, and not enough for a man who had no idea why rifles were pointed at him. The driver was different. He stayed calm. His papers stayed clean. His story held. He named streets in Decatur. He described a schoolhouse. He complained about the Army's food with beautiful accuracy. He knew the password schedule for the day, which meant some poor American had already given it up under capture or death. We tried the usual questions. He survived them. We tried the same questions out of order. He survived those too. He even corrected one of our men on a detail about Illinois in a way that made everyone in the room hate him because it sounded exactly like something a real American would do. By then, I was no longer sure whether we had caught a German or were about to ruin the life of the most unfortunate GI in Belgium. That doubt is hard to describe unless you have held another man's fate with cold fingers. If you believe him and he is enemy, men die down the road. If you disbelieve him and he is yours, you become the danger you thought you were stopping. So I went back to the papers, not because papers tell the truth, they rarely do, but because lies, when they are built too carefully, sometimes leave a cleaner surface than truth. His movement order had mud on the corner. His paybook had the right wear. His dog tags looked old enough. His identity card looked better than most of ours. That was the first thing that bothered me. Better. Army paperwork was not beautiful. It was folded wrong, typed wrong, stamped half-blind by tired clerks, carried in rain, sweat, oil, and pockets full of tobacco crumbs. The forger had made a card that looked like an officer's idea of a card. Straight edges, clean letters, proper spacing, too much respect for the object. I held it closer to the lantern. There was a line printed near the top of the card, a line I had seen so many times that I no longer read it. Most of us did not read it. It was just army noise. Not a pass, for identification purposes only. On his card, every word was spelled correctly. That was the mistake. On a batch of real cards moving through our sector, the Army had printed the word wrong. It did not say identification. It said indentification. An ugly little extra letter. A government mistake. A clerk's error multiplied by the thousands. Nobody fixed it because the war had more urgent problems than a misspelled noun. To an American soldier, that mistake was invisible because it had always been there. To a German forger, it was intolerable. He saw bad English and repaired it. He made the card more correct than the Army, and that made it false. I put the card on the table between us. He looked at it, not at me, at it. That is when I knew. The body always finds the wound before the mouth admits it is bleeding. I tapped the word with one finger. You studied the language, I said, but you didn't study the Army. He said nothing. You learned our slang. You learned our units. You learned enough baseball to survive a checkpoint. You learned how to swear at bad coffee. I slid the card closer to him. But you didn't know we make mistakes and keep issuing them. His face changed only a little, but in that little change, the American disappeared. What remained was a very young German in very dangerous clothes. No villain's grin, no grand confession, no speech about Hitler. Just a tired man who had been trained for a few weeks to become somebody else and had just discovered that the somebody else included a printing error. The rules were explained to him plainly. He was captured behind our lines in an American uniform while operating under a deception mission. That was not the same thing as being taken in German field gray with a rifle in his hands. Every army in the war understood the difference. So did he. He asked first about his passenger, then about himself, then about the others. That order told me more than his answers had. He knew there were others close enough to matter. We gave him a choice that was not really mercy and not quite cruelty either. Talk now, and maybe some men live who are not supposed to die today. Stay silent, and the uniform you chose will speak for you. He did not give us everything. Nobody does. But he gave us a road sign that had been turned near a village we had not checked yet. He gave us a false order that had been prepared for a convoy moving east instead of west. He gave us a rendezvous point marked only by a burned farmhouse and a culvert half covered with snow. Most of it arrived too late to become legend. That is the truth about war. The useful things are often useful for 1 hour. Then they are filed, forgotten, buried under the next emergency. But one convoy was stopped before it drove into the wrong valley. One telephone crew found a cut line sooner than they would have. One checkpoint started checking cards not for what was missing, but for what had been fixed. That was enough. Not glorious, not clean. Enough. Operation Greif never captured the Meuse bridges it had been built to seize. Its equipment shortages, rush training, bad roads, and the slowing German advance all strangled the plan before it could become the nightmare Hitler imagined. But as a psychological weapon, it worked better than it had any right to work. It made American soldiers aim suspicion backward. It made the rear area feel penetrated. It turned trivia into ammunition and ordinary ignorance into danger. Some German infiltrators were captured wearing American uniforms and executed as spies. Others slipped back. Others spread rumors even after capture, including stories that pushed Allied security into fearing attacks on Eisenhower himself. Skorzeny survived the war. In 1947, he and several officers were tried over the use of American uniforms. He was acquitted after the court accepted a distinction between wearing enemy uniforms for deception and fighting in them. A distinction that remains uncomfortable because the men sent through our lines had known perfectly well what would happen if they were caught. That is the part people often want simplified. They want the infiltrators to be monsters, or victims, or clever commandos, or doomed boys. War is rarely polite enough to give you one clean category. Some believed in what they were doing. Some obeyed. Some were young enough to mistake nerve for loyalty. All of them stepped into a disguise whose failure could end against a wall at dawn. And on our side, paranoia did damage too. It slowed ambulances. It delayed commanders. It put rifles on the wrong chests. It made Americans prove they were American to men who were themselves too frightened to ask good questions. That was Skorzeny's real achievement, not a bridge, a doubt. A small black seed of doubt planted under every helmet. The card stayed on my table until evening, not because it was important anymore, but because I could not stop looking at that word, identification. Correct, clean, and fatal. A perfect spelling on a false card. Around it sat the ordinary filth of a real army, wet gloves, bad coffee, a cracked pencil, a lantern that smoked, a map with 3 outdated marks on it, and a stack of forms that probably contained 20 more mistakes nobody had time to repair. That was the lesson I took from that morning. Not that Americans were smarter. We were not. Not that Germans were foolish. They were not. The lesson was smaller and colder than that. A disguise survives the things people think to question. It dies in the place nobody respected enough to fake. The accent can be trained, the password can be stolen, the hometown can be memorized, the uniform can be captured, cleaned, and worn until it smells like the man inside it belongs there. But the tiny habits of a system are harder to counterfeit. Its laziness, its errors, its bad ink, its crooked stamps, its misspelled words. The enemy had learned our language. They had learned our uniforms. They had learned our questions. But they had not learned our mistakes.